Hi, I am Steph Altum, and I am here with Jeff Radichel, who owns the Next Step.
Hey,
And
how are you
we are,
doing, Steph?
I'm doing well. We are just going to spend a little time talking about the program that we offer to people in transition.
Looking
So,
forward to
my,
this.
yeah, me too. But I always love talking to you. So, this is going to be fun. Um, so, my first question for you is why are you offering this program?
It's a great question. So, having been in transition twice, and we always use that word transition because we don't like to say that we got fired or we were let go or laid off or whatever it is. So I was fired, right? And I also left a job because it wasn't a good fit at the moment, for all kinds of other reasons. And so it's difficult as we go into transition. I know what it was like walking in the door, telling my wife that I didn't have a job anymore, and her looking at me like in shock and really struggling with what we're going to do next, and I know the pain and the uncertainty that goes through that. And so as a result, our mission, part of our mission in Give Back is to be able to offer whatever we can in terms of help for people that are also going through those same times of uncertainty.
Hmm. So, what are some of the signs that you saw in yourself? And this is a stressful thing.
hmm
So, what are some of the things you saw in yourself in terms of that stress, as well as what you see in other people that are going through this?
Yeah, so we've done hundreds of these in terms of helping people through transition, and it's interesting. You start to see similar things time and time again. So, having spent most of my life in the manufacturing community, whether it's ops or sales or marketing or new product development, there's different personalities that come into how they handle these kind of transitions. So, for myself, I was a high D in the disc profile, right? So, big time driver, highest D we've ever assessed, right? So, what I tended to do is what I think a lot happens in many cases is even before a transition starts, there's things that are going on internally, both with for myself in that case or for the environment I was in. Probably have gone through the phases where I thought, well, I can just outwork this, right? I'll just work 80 hours a week or 60 hours a week or whatever, and I'll just work so hard and outperform, and things will get better just by outworking it. And so I tried that, and in the case of getting fired, it didn't work, right? It's because
Mhm.
there's fundamental things that are going on. So the build up into a point of transition can be challenging, right? Because I've already done things where I felt like I've done everything I could to resolve the issue, and in some cases, it still doesn't work. And so at that moment, where in my case, I was given a box in the middle of the day to walk out of the apartment or walk out of the office, you're in this state where it's like I was doing everything right. You might have even gotten in an emotional state where you're like, hey, I think it's turning the corner because I'm doing all the right things. And then for something to happen, you just really wrestle with it. So there's this emotional kind of letdown that happens in the moment. And it can be different for different people. There's usually in the early stages almost a relief piece that comes over. Like, finally, I'm not going to have to go to this office and deal with this stuff on a day in and day out basis anymore because it was causing stress, maybe even to a level I didn't even fully appreciate until I didn't have to go in. So then usually what happens is people start to get into this, oh, well, done with that. I'm going to have a new job in a week. So they kind of go into this honeymoon phase right away where it's euphoric, and I get the day off and I get to do what I want to do, and I'm going to find a new job really fast and everything's wonderful. But you go through these transitions of acceptance where you go, hey, I'm in this honeymoon phase. Then it's, well, this isn't as easy as I thought, and I can't find any work. And then it gets to, well, this isn't as good. And eventually, depending on how long you're out, you might get to a place where you're like rocked by the reality that this is going to take time, and maybe I don't know how to approach this at all. And now almost in despair at times. And so you walk through those phases, and then after a time, you get to a point of adjustment, and things start to get better again because you start to get into a process or a system that's going to help you get where you need to be. So there's all those emotional pieces that go through. And so part of what we're trying to do in the give back is get someone through those as fast as possible so they can get to a very proactive place where they have a solid process. They understand that everyone lands, even people that shouldn't land and end up landing. It just takes time. And the real question is what are we doing in that process to make it one, go faster, but more importantly, number two, where I land in a place that is going to be good for me so that unlike what I did, I jumped to another bad one. And so I jumped from bad to bad. And so then I found myself in a similar position again, right? So I think that's part of this is understanding the emotions of the moment, what we're walking through, but then also understanding that part of that is getting to a good place from a process discipline standpoint. So I have a good, clear vision and a path to get where I need to be.
So when you talk about that vision and that path, I think about what we do in the transition program where we take people through assessments, we meet with them and talk to them, and you have a very um, well laid out way of job hunting that kind of is very non-traditional actually, and it's eye-opening. It was for me when I heard you discuss it with someone. But how would that have helped you when you were going through that, when you take all those emotions involved, and the hope that you're going to find the right thing and then you didn't, but you don't realize that right away? How would going through a transitional process have helped you?
Yeah, and so there's a lot of transitional processes that
Yeah.
are out there. And maybe I should stop for the moment and say, I hope whatever way someone has that they can find a good process for themselves, go do it. Whether it's with us
Mhm.
or not, like it's fine. Like I
Yeah.
went to a couple local job transitions groups. I went and I got tons of resources and information from all kinds of different sources. So there are a lot of good transition programs out there. Find what works for you and what you need. That's so full stop. This isn't about us. This is about you going through that process
Exactly.
and doing it. So the second piece of that then is when you look at the processes, and there's some good books out there. George Murray here in town has written the book Hired, and there's others that are out there that have gone through these as well that we know well that will connect people with. But as you're going through those processes, it's like when I was doing it, that first 90 days, I was going through that process. And this was the second one, right? So it was even worse on the first one. But the second one, I was going through the process, and one of the things that came away from it was I thought, well, I just had a network. I gotta go have coffee. And I like doing that stuff. So for me, it was easy. I schedule a bunch of coffees. In fact, I had 8 coffees in a row at the Caribou Coffee on the West End in Minneapolis in one day. Every hour, I'd have another person, and then at 45 minutes, I'd have to like kick them out of the seat, and then the next hour, the next person would come in. And the reality is that while it's nice to meet a lot of people,
Mhm.
it isn't necessarily helpful.
Right.
So, for example, if you're looking for a manufacturing job, there's 4,300 manufacturers in the Twin Cities metro area. I could have 10 lifetimes. I'd never talk to everybody at those 4,300 manufacturers, but there are a handful of people that are networked into a lot. So instead of having 110 coffees in 90 days like I did, there was actually 3 or 4 coffees where if I had a good target list and put that in front of that person in 15 minutes with a target list of 100 companies, they can go, yes, no, no, yes, yes, no, no, yes, yeah, talk to these people, boom, boom, boom. And I can walk away with a very productive conversation that helps me. So there are times when you're in the transition where you want to network. There's a support need,
Mhm.
family, friends, coworkers, other people where you need that support. But understand there's the time for support and there's the time for the activity that you need to find the job. And so, what I encourage people to do is it's fine for you to network, but be more specific about what you're trying to do from a networking standpoint. We try to help people with that going through this process to speed it up because it can go much faster if you're targeted. If you really apply good business development processes to your search, which unfortunately, especially in manufacturing, most people are not coming out of the sales department. And within sales, most salespeople aren't really trained to do pure business development. And when you're in transition, you're in business development, right? Like, so
Yeah.
that's your new job. And so it can be very difficult to understand what's the methodology I need to walk through to do that, and very uncomfortable, especially for people that are not, you know, business development oriented, more of introverted, much more analytic, where they can get sucked into like paralysis of analysis, all these other things that make it difficult to then get out there and find the new work.
Mhm. Which really brings me to the next part of what we do, and that's the assessment and helping people to better understand who they are, because they're really, like you said, they're really out there, uh, honestly selling who they are and what they do to someone.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
also making sure that the people they're selling it to are the right people.
Yeah, it's funny that you
So,
bring that up because there's this whole idea around, getting into selling. And so The best way for me to describe it is I go back to those 110 coffees, right?
Mhm.
And I start out those coffees and I would come with everything I did, right? It'd
Yeah.
be an hour and I would say, okay, I got to tell you everything about myself because that's the way I'm going to cast this really wide net. And it's,
Mhm.
therefore I'm going to then have a better chance of finding something. So I'd have my resume and I'd say, I did this and I did this and I did this and I did this. And then the person across the table, if they were in transition, they do the same thing back to me. And then we got done and we kind of stared at each other like, well, that was therapeutic, but I'm not sure what it did to help me find the job. Right. And so the approach then becomes a little bit different. And I think this will actually relieve a bunch of people that are, when they think the word having to sell and
Mhm.
getting very, anxious about that, it's really less about selling. So what it becomes then is the whole assessment piece is the old adage, know thyself.
Mhm.
Who are you? What do you want? And we talk about reading the book, What Color is Your Parachute, as a great starting point. In fact, I tell people, don't do your first networking session until you've read What Color is Your Parachute. So you've done the flower diagram and now have a better understanding of what it is that you truly want going forward. What are you actually looking for? In sales, we call it the qualification criteria, right?
Mhm.
So if you haven't built that, you're just spraying and praying, right? It's the old, it's just all over the place. And, so while I appreciate the praying as a Christian man, it's like, it's not necessarily the most effective technique. And so the point of that is then when you sit back and you do the assessments, you start to understand more about yourself. How do you communicate? What things are you looking for in a job? What is it that you're trying to accomplish in terms of the work on a day by day basis? And so what kind of work do you like? The tactical front end work, working with the team, like in the weeds, kind of doing the analytics? Do you like the project management, discernment kind of work? Do you like to be really on the fuzzy front end, thinking about things that maybe nobody else is thinking about? And so it's important to both understand the type of environment you're looking for, your communication style, the type of work you want to do. Because the more that's solidified, then when you step into those discussions in transition, they change. Now it's not, hey, I got to run down my Rolodex of all the stuff I've done. No, now it's like, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm looking for. Here are the criteria of companies that I've, looked at that I'm thinking are a good fit. What do you think? And as we say in selling, telling ain't selling, right? So if I'm doing most of the talking in those discussions, I'm not really selling anyway. And
Mhm.
quite frankly, I've been in a bunch of those where after 55 minutes of listening to somebody talk to me, I'm still confused of what I'm going to help them with. So the better prepared we are, having our own knowledge of ourselves and what we're looking for, the more effective the meeting will be. The more likely then you can ask for help in the meeting, and that help will be targeted, and someone can really point you in a direction that's going to be helping you get your next job.
Right. And then when you do go out actually looking for jobs, it's not just about being interviewed, it's about interviewing too. It's kind of a give and take so that you make sure that
Huge.
you are the right fit for them and they are the right fit for you.
Yeah, that's a gigantic difference, I think, in the way
Mhm.
people approach these things. Because most come in with the approach of, oh, I've got to sell you about
Mhm.
me. And it's like, you are unique. We're all unique and
Yes.
wonderfully made, right? So you are unique in your own gifts and skill sets. The question becomes is, what is the right place for you to use those skill sets? So when you walk into these calls with this target account list, you're basically interviewing them to say, I'm not sure if you're the right place for me to work. Help me understand a little bit more about your organization, your culture, to see if it aligns with what I want to do. And while that sounds presumptuous, there are 4,300 manufacturing companies in the Twin Cities you could work with, right? So the
Mhm.
question becomes is, how do you find a good alignment fit, somewhere that you want to stick around with a long time and work with going forward to apply your gifts? Because life's short. And most people, what, they work 6 different jobs. We we get the opportunity to apply those gifts, and so it's good to be in a place that's going to receive them well.
Mhm. Yes. And I've heard you say too that everybody lands somewhere. So it's I guess the idea that there's hope. Don't
Oh yeah.
panic. Go through this methodically and make sure that you end up in a place that's a good fit for both of you because it's doing them a favor too.
Yeah, there's nothing like where you get into your sweet spot.
Mhm.
And I'm sure everybody that watches this will, if they've experienced it in one way or the other, whether it's at their work life or
Mhm.
outside of work, when they get into that place where they feel like it's the right alignment between their unique gifts, God-given gifts and what they want to do, all of a sudden it's like pinging a tuning fork, and it just starts to vibrate, and it's just like, wow, I wish I could do this all day long. You can you can have jobs like that.
Yeah.
I'm giving you permission. It's okay to really like your work. Now it's still pulling weeds and different things that happen part of the job, but you can get into work what you're going to really enjoy it day to day and excited to get up. So I think it's important for people to take a little time up front. I don't mean months. Take a week and just read a couple books and get your alignment around who you are and what you're looking for before you tear off and try to find the next gig.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's really great advice. That it comes right back to don't panic, figure it out first, and make sure that you have a process that you're going through and that you're comfortable with yourself and your own skin. You know yourself.
Yeah, amen. And obviously, our call out is if anybody's watching this and they want some help in that transition, read more on the web page about what we can do to help you. And we'd love to talk to you anytime.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.